This week, I'm joined by Something Wicked's Patrick Higgins to talk about high-tier D&D and what you need to think about as both a player and a DM from anywhere between 7th and 20th level. Welcome to We Speak Common. Hello and welcome to the D&D podcast for everyone, because here we speak common. I'm Ben Norris, I'm your host, and this is the show brought to you in partnership with The Dice Dungeon, your one-stop shop for beautiful, pristine and premium D&D dice, whether they're resin, metal or glass. Yes, those are a thing that exist. And where else would you roll those premium dice other than beautiful dice rolling trays? You can get all of that, plus books and other D&D paraphernalia at The Dice Dungeon. The website is in the description below. And of course, if you use the code We Speak Common on checkout, you'll get 10% off your entire order. Also brought to you in partnership with Describe. Describe is the place to go if you struggle with creative writing and descriptions in your D&D or any TTRPG games. If you struggle with describing how that spell looks or the ferocity of a monster or the beauty of a location, then Describe has professional writers who are doing just that for you in box text to put into your home games. Head over to describe.com, link in the description below, to check out a load of their free scenes. But if you want full access to over 3,500 scenes and growing every week, their different collections and more, then you can subscribe using the code COMMON for 10% off your monthly subscription for the first 2 years. And of course, by using those codes, you'll be supporting the show too. And I should mention that this week is your last chance to enter, today particularly, if you're listening on Thursday, to enter the giveaway thanks to Obsidian Portal. If you want to have a fantastic little corner of the internet as your own place, a single website that has everything you need for your campaign, from a homepage to maps to a wiki built on the NPCs and characters you create for you and your players to use, then head over to the Twitter at We Speak Common and enter into that giveaway today. You'll find the tweet on our profile. And we will announce the winner of a full year's Ascendant membership next week. I should also mention as well that there are some amazing Patreons who support this show directly. If you would like to get involved with that, if you want to come and join us on the private Discord server, get the first look at everything that we have going on here at We Speak Common, and of course, chat to us and get involved with the community every single day, then head over to the Patreon and sign up there. Honestly, could not do it without those amazing people. But if you don't want to pay for this free content on the internet, I totally get it. Just give us a share and send us to a D&D friend of yours. Okay, cool. So with all of that done and out of the way, let's jump into the actual good stuff, the actual meat of the episode today. And I'm joined for the first time, and I'm going to say straight off the bat, I'm going to be very optimistic and say not the last time. Bye, Patrick. How you doing, buddy?
I'm good. How are you? Thanks for having me. I'm a long time on and off again listener. Listened far more often when I was commuting, but then I've been working from home for the last year and a half almost, so I don't commute as much.
Yeah, that is a big one. I remember when the world went to pieces and the average listen, like I get a little bar chart of like everything of all time, and yep. There's a big old dip where the pandemic hit properly, and then it like built back up over time, and it's like gone back to normal and got better and stuff. But if you go back to when lockdown happened sort of generically over that course of like 3 weeks across the world, you can see that drop of people stopping going to work. It's so interesting.
It's wild. We could do a whole episode on like the weird ripple effects of the pandemic. I do like print materials, like standard paper, difficult to find. The whole supply chain slowdown across everything. Lumber prices going up. I don't know how they are for you, but they're insane here.
I'll be honest, I wouldn't know. Lumber prices are something I've never monitored.
Well, for me here, like a 2x4 by, I guess, 2x4 by 8. Sorry, I'm on the Imperial system. I switch back and forth because I'm Canadian. But they used to be like maybe $5 to $7, and they're like 12 or 14 right now, if you can get them. So it's wild. But anyways,
D&D.
Yeah, rein me in because I will like, I'll go off on a tangent.
You'll go off on lumber prices. Is that how it works?
Don't even get me started on lumber futures. Yeah.
In my day, yeah.
Back when I built, you used to be able to get fur. None of this SPF. Yes.
I'm so not like DIY that it's mental. I think the most DIY I get is like the little bit of crafting that I do. But anyway, so before we jump into anything, then I always say to people, introduce yourself, but also tell me about your D&D career.
My D&D career is actually, well, my D&D career is recent.
Okay.
But I actually started playing back in elementary school. And you'll be able to figure out how old I am. But we had this like, and this is not a brag, this is just weird. They had this thing, they call it the gifted program, and they would like send you off for a week.
Oh, all right,
stuff.
you.
I know, right? It's silly. But you'd go, and we did one where it was like, they called it, I think, enrichment or something. And like 1 week it was zoology. But then the 1 week we went, and it was like fantasy role playing and board games.
Oh my God.
Yeah, so I was about 10 when we went. I was grade 4, about 10 years old. And, every day we got to try out this new cool board game. And these would have been like, oh man, I'm trying to think, like there was the catapult game. I can't remember the names of all of them. I can picture them so vividly in my head though. But these two brothers that have now become best friends of mine, way back when, Tom and Nick, they're like, oh wait, and they're looking in the box, like, you guys have D&D here, can we play? And the teacher's like, oh, I don't know, that's for like the grade 7s and the grade 8s, like the 12-year-olds. And they're like, we've played. Like, I guess so. And we ended up basically playing a campaign for a week of D&D, and it was like the best thing I'd ever experienced in my life. And from then on, we played off and on. We used to, in the summers, our friends had a cottage. I'm from southwestern Ontario in Canada, and a town called Sarnia, which is right on one of the Great Lakes, Lake Huron, and they have a cottage up on Lake Huron, 10-15 minute drive away. And we'd go and we'd spend a week there, and we would always do these, a week, maybe 2 in the summer, and we'd do these like nonstop, wake up, have our breakfast, D&D, jump in the lake, D&D, and that's it. We do these campaigns, and that was all 2nd edition. So I'm a 2E character going way back. And then life went on, and we fell, we didn't fall out of touch with each other, but we played various games here and there. It just happens. We all played a lot, and then in undergrad, I met a bunch of friends, and we all played World of Warcraft together, and any those kinds of things. And then, God, it would have been like 3-4 years ago at this point, maybe a little longer. The Pathfinder books went on sale on a Humble Bundle, and I was like, I'll get these. Sure, what's Pathfinder? I've heard good things, because I didn't play 3rd edition, and then I heard like not so good things about 4th edition, and I didn't even know that 5th edition was a thing. So I got these books and contacted basically everybody and was like, hey, do you guys want to try this out? We can see how it goes. And all of them were like, yes. So I got like my younger brother who I play with, my best friends growing up who I played with, and then all my really good friends, my best friends from undergrad, and we all got together and we played Pathfinder for about a year. Pathfinder's fun, but it's very crunchy. So it's a lot of Mathfinder. For me, I was like, this is so easy, because I came from 2nd edition. I'm like, wow, look at that. Well, there's no THAC0. Like, when I heard they got rid of THAC0, I was like, sacrilege. How can you play D&D with THAC0? Looking back now, it's like the most deliberately obtuse rule.
Oh my God, it's crazy.
It's wild. Like, and it made sense. What's crazy is it became automatic computation for me. I'd look and be like, yeah, okay, cool. That guy's an armor class 15. My THAC0 is 10. Okay, yeah, I need to roll 5 or whatever it was. Like, and you probably mentioned it, but for those listening at home, THAC0 stands for 2-hit armor class 0. A low armor class was better in 2nd edition. And so if your THAC0 was 10, you needed to roll a 10 on a d20 to hit the armor class of 10. And every number you rolled above that went down the armor class. So if someone was a -5 armor class and your THAC0 was 10, you had to roll a 15 or higher to hit them. Super straightforward.
It's so backwards. It's so crazy.
Yeah. Instead of, okay, 5, you need to roll 5 or more.
Yeah.
It's just,
I think as well, like the thing with THAC0, like there's so many people who, and I wasn't a 2nd edition baby, because being in the UK meant that it kind of, I don't think it made its way over, and at the point that it would have made its way over, it was moving on to different editions for us, and I'm younger anyway as well, so it's like by the time I picked up D&D, it was beyond that point. So I think the first time I encountered THAC0 was like, and I think this is true for most people who have come into D&D at later editions is if they've picked up like the old enhanced editions of like the Baldur's Gate games.
Yep.
And they're like, what is this? How is it working? And to talk to people about it. And like, I got my head around it. And I, when I was like looking into older editions when I was playing Baldur's Gate, and to talk to people about it and explain it, it's like the D&D equivalent of the offside rule on steroids.
Yeah, it to me, it's like, like you said, like a super old timey game, like any game, you know, like I know like football, soccer, like that kind of thing. I don't mean like old timey as in doesn't exist anymore, but this game that has these
been
rules
around for years.
Yeah, and someone's like, a new person might be like, these rules make no sense, but all the people that like are into this thing are like, well, you just don't know. It's just like how it goes. This is the game. You're like, so yeah. I mean, and there's other things like, so switching over to Pathfinder. Well, Pathfinder was bananas because then we broke it super hard and super quick, as you do. And then we switched. I basically went to a learn to play D&D night at my local game shop. I was like, hey, how's it going? Can I try this out? Sure. And I was like, I played second edition a lot. I played I played role-playing games. I'll be able to figure it out. And I sat down with the table and they were like level 7 or 8. And they'd been playing this campaign and played like one session. Was like, oh my God, like I sat down and made a character in whatever 5, maybe 10 minutes. We just whipped together a rogue or ranger probably. Ranger. Cause again, I grew up on second edition and I read all the Driz books that are on my desk behind me. Poor Rangers. I didn't realize they were so like loathed.
Yeah, we can't even get started on that because we won't get to the main topic today.
No. But then came back to my buddies and was like, hey, so 5th edition's sort of awesome. If you guys want to maybe switch and I can try DMing, and they're all like done in. And so we play on like Roll20 and Discord and all that fun stuff, and basically been playing ever since. And then played with somebody who was starting a podcast and said, hey, listen, I'm going to be doing this podcast. It's going to be eventually a live play show streamed on Twitch. I think you'd be a real fun player. You want to try it? If you want to, give it a go. I said, sure. And so now we do that on Wednesday nights, as I quietly plug myself.
No, go for it. By all means.
Twitch.tv/something5e. So the show is called Something Wicked, and it's set in a homebrew campaign of Gas Time. Carnifexia is the world. Gas Time's the country we're currently in. It's this like super broken kind of realm where portals, like holes to other planes, will open and close. We already came across a portal that essentially we looked in it and it was like 2 kilometers above Ravnica and we were looking down at it. I think and that was like level 2. So it's like, granted, my character, I play Cassidy Thorne, who's a I don't know, agent of chaos. She's a fawn from the Feywild. So I use the fawn class from, is it Mystic Order of Theros?
Theros, yeah.
Yeah, but I'm much more familiar with the Feywild because the campaign I'm running, my characters managed to get themselves in the Feywild. Me thinking, like, I guess so, they'll come back, and they played there for over a year of in-game time. Like, I think they went to the Feywild at level 5, and they're kind of sort of out of it. They don't know yet, and they're level 12 or 13. So
wow.
I had to really figure. And then, so when I've seen now that there's these books of about the Feywild coming out, I'm like, yes, thank you. I've been patching it together based on stuff I know and finding, old things from whatever, like, is it Dragon Magazine or something like that?
Yeah.
But it's been really cool because I know all about the Feywild now. Granted, they'll change it, and I'm like, oh no.
Yeah. It's always the way.
So yeah, I'm a cast member on that show, and I play Cassidy Thorne. She's a fast talking. She sounds kind of like a broadcaster from the 1940s, 1950s.
Amazing.
Yeah, and super chatty. Very much a social character. Like stats. I rolled the stats, which I'm pleased on, but they're good. So she's not strong, and she's kind of dumb. D&D dumb.
Yeah.
And so she. Very self-conscious about that. The backstory, which the guests or the cast still haven't got on to figuring out. No one knows why she's there. She sort of got tricked by like the cool girls. She's I took the courtesan background, and then she's an unaligned fae. So that means she doesn't work for the winter or the summer court, and so she could run messages between them and those kinds of things, and work with a lot of the lords and ladies and nobles and whatnot.
That's cool. That's really cool.
And so, but she's very self-conscious about her intelligence, because she, talking with the other courtesans, they more or less like mean girled her into going through this hole to see what's over there. She went through, the portal closed, and now she's just in this world. Well, pretty light spirit. She's like, okay, like off I go. So I'm working on getting her like a headband of vast intellect or something, so that I can multi-class her as like a wizard.
Oh, sweet. That'd be cool.
Which would be fun. Like I've been looking at, what are like the good synergistic? I'm like, who cares? Like, what is she? She wants to be like she wants to be an academic, and she can't. And she doesn't know that it's not an intelligence thing, but the idea is that like, I want people like, people to respect that I'm smart and I'm this and I'm that. Because she's made some choices that whoopsie doodles aren't so great. So yeah, that's Cassidy and Something Wicked. And then I just play a lot of D&D or read a lot of D&D stuff. I just really like it. I love talking about it. And it's so approachable now. 5th edition. I am.
Oh my God, so much.
It's crazy. I mean, I know there's, Critical Role. We all know it. Especially I'm assuming the audience, but there's so many people playing D&D or even just mentioning D&D. Like it's wild seeing when like, is it, I don't know if it's D&D, but like Henry
Cavill.
Henry Cavill. He's like a proper nerd.
Oh yeah.
And it's, that blows up things. People go like, whoa, I can build my own computer. Whoa, this is kind of not necessarily like this is cool, but like I don't have to be afraid to try this.
I was watching the WitcherCon that they did like last month, and in the interview he made a comment about how the lantern in one of the sets that they were showing off looked like a crucible from 40K. Okay. And I was like, I don't really get the reference, but I appreciate that that's true, proper nerdy knowledge. But this is the thing, like we talk about D&D being accessible and how like just everyone, it feels like they're playing it or knows about it now. And that's why I love talking to people, particularly from America and like you who grew up and played 2nd edition when it hit that initial kind of popularity in a way. It's not compared to now, I suppose, but when it was in that height, because we didn't have any of that over here. Like I am so jealous of people on Reddit who are like, oh, I found my dad's old collection of 2nd edition books. I'm like, there is no way you're going to come across 2nd edition or maybe even 3rd edition D&D books in the UK unless they're like a hyper nerd. Like it's so rare. But now, like I was the kid who got people into D&D. I was the one who was like, I'll be a DM, like come play out our game, come join my table. And I hunted for those people and in a way built my group. Like I found people and I was like, hey, do you want to be in D&D? And they'd be like, maybe. And now they're still playing D&D. And then I had those people who tried it and they very quickly were like, yeah, it's not for me, whatever.
Yeah.
But like
I even did I did like a talk on D&D at a leadership conference, and everyone was like,
oh my God,
what?
yes.
Whoa. Like it was, I did a Petra Kucha on, I think I called it like, it was like Beholders in Boardrooms or something like that. How to bring something like Dungeons and Dragons like into as a team building thing for your work.
People talk about like, oh, how do I put my hobbies on my CV? D&D is absolutely one of those things. It's leadership, it's group activity, it's team building, it's all of that stuff. And Phoebe came home a couple of weeks ago from being at work. She's like, oh, I ran into like so-and-so from school who we knew, like Phoebe and I met when we were in 6th form. So when we were like 18, and this person had been in my high school and was like not one of the people, like was a cool girl, was not one of the people to be playing D&D. And Phoebe had mentioned it to her and she was like, oh yeah, I know about D&D. I really want to try it. And I'm like, how are these people now hearing about D&D? It blows my mind how many people. And I'm a little jaded. I'm sat here and I'm like, oh, but it wasn't cool when I was into it. There's always that, isn't there? There's
like that the gatekeeper in the back of your head, and I'm like, whatever, man. Like, just be excited. I mean, even with D&D now, people are like, kind of, what is it? Is it like wizards and swords? And like,
yes.
Depending on who I'm talking to. Sometimes I'm like, or I'm like, but a lot of people are like, I want to try, but I don't know. And they can't get a good vibe on it. And all I say is it's cooperative storytelling. And then there's a game master or a dungeon master who kind of like helps narrate the story, controls the world, if you will, that you're in. And if you imagine yourself, you're going to run across your lawn and try and jump over the fence. And you just do that physically, like for real. If your character was doing it, the DM might get you to roll, and that number represents the chance of you jumping over the fence. You're like, oh, I'm like, yeah. And a good DM or good players at a table will absolutely help you along. Like, don't worry, you don't need to get bogged down. You can, people can love getting bogged down, but you don't need to get bogged down into the roles and the thises and the that's. If you have a good DM, I think, or a good person, they're lowering the barrier to entry.
Yeah, definitely. And I think like that's the thing that I've enjoyed so much. Like I have one of the things I pride myself on is the amount of people that I've brought into the hobby and the accessibility that I've brought to it. And I love bringing new people in, and I love running D&D games. People will say, I think Ray said this to me. I was chatting to Ray the other day, and he said to me like, oh, I said, I'm going to run D&D for this person who's played like 4 sessions. And he said, you're going to spoil that boy. And I was like, yes, that's what I aim to do. I aim to take people and go, have you ever played D&D? And then give them the best experience in their lives so they get hooked on it like it's crack.
Yeah, because it can be.
It can be, absolutely. I mean, it is for me. Yeah,
there's a friend of mine here at Seashell where I am. We were talking about this and that, and maybe he was thinking about maybe Warhammer. His son's 8-9 years old, but he's like, we've been actually thinking about Dungeons and Dragons, but and he's got like a northern English accent. I'm trying to think of where it would be. So Dungeons and Dragons. He's got the Jon Snow accent. And his son's, I can't remember now because COVID's weird, but he's like, 8, 9, 10. And so they went to the local game shop and kind of got a starter kit. And he's like, yeah, and I think we got this Lost Mines. I'm like, Lost Mines of Fandora? I can't remember it all because I haven't actually played a lot of the official modules.
Yeah, Fandelver.
Yeah, and he's like, but I don't know. I'm looking at this. I don't know what I'm doing. Like, dude, I'll totally DM it for you. Sure, if you want. Like, I would love to do that. Yeah. So I'm actually going over there tonight to do a bit of a session 0. And then another, my daughter's friend from school's dad that we're friends with, same again. He played a lot of D&D. I think in undergrad, they played a lot of like 3rd edition. And then he fell out. And like my wife and his wife were chatting away. And it was these things where they're like, oh, Pat plays D&D over work. Like, and trying to get us to like now be friends.
Yeah.
But we both, you don't know because you're like, so you play D&D, and you don't want to like be like, nah. Get too into it. But
well, that's the thing. People who I like, people know me from. I've had a very public facing job for a lot of years, and so people kind of knew me, and I mentioned it on the radio once that I played D&D, and then I suddenly got like loads of messages from people like, you play D&D? And I was like, yeah. And then it kind of happens now where like people will talk to me, and I'm so open about it. Like I was known as the D&D guy in one of I went for like the equivalent of an audition for like radio presenters, and I used D&D as my topic, and because it was unique, they were like, because over in the UK, like, oh, D&D, that's unique. It just happened that one of the quote unquote judges had played in the 80s. And he was like, oh, I know exactly what you're talking about. And I was like, oh, cool. Yay. So like it worked really well. But now people come to me and they're like, oh, I didn't know you play D&D. I want to try it. And I'm like, yeah, I play D&D. I also have been running a podcast about it for 3 years. And they're like, oh. So it goes from that like, you play D&D to, oh, you know a lot about D&D. And I'm like, yeah, but I'll help you out. Let's sit down and play.
Keep it. Gate's open.
Of course.
Like,
well,
I'm like, I'm sitting here making sure this gate doesn't get closed and locked. And it's like I said, super approachable. This actually could be a good segue into what we're going to chat about. Is this kind of some people call it like early levels, or I air quote. You can't see me because I'm not on video, but air quote mid-tier play, which is this like level 7, 12-ish or so. Because for us growing up, it was all about, we would build these characters and do all these things, but we would only really be playing, like, I don't know why we didn't keep playing other than the summer. It kind of became this thing that we did. And so we often only played characters from levels 1 to maybe 5. Like 5, we'd be like, whoa. And leveling was much slower in 2nd edition. And like, if you went to 0 hit points, you died. Like, that was it.
Yeah. You're just out. Yeah.
Well, you're dead. You lose. And we'd always be doing something a little different. And we actually have, my younger brother's got the box of our D&D stuff from growing up at his place. I got a bunch when he came out last time to visit. He's in Toronto, so that's like 3,000 kilometers or some stupid number away. Yeah. But he brought a bunch of the books and some of the character sheets and stuff. but because we never really played into this kind of mid upper, as I'm DMing, they're now level 12, 13. I've noticed the challenge is of being a player that's maybe new, or even a player that's like old, is like, how do I play a character that's like can actually flex, can do some things. And I noticed it mostly with them. I dangled a dragon, which I think would be a hilarious band name. Dangling
Dangled
dragon.
Yeah.
The dangled dragon.
It's a good tavern name as well.
Yeah.
Take that. How use it?
I dangled a dragon, just throwing it out there. Not at all related to what I had been trying to like set them up to do, knowing they'll do whatever. And actually, sorry, this is rambly, but going way back to one of your real early podcasts, you were talking about not wanting the players to feel like they're on rails. I don't know if you remember this, but they're on rails. They just don't realize they're just switching trains, and eventually and so I will circle them back, because spoiler alert, the big bad end guy I was trying to build for them is a Shadow Tarrasque. And the idea, though, there's a place in the Feywild called Astralzan, I think it is, and it spends 6 months or so of the year in the Feywild, and then it ports and it goes to the prime material, and then it's there, and then it ports back. So it goes back and forth. It's this like crazy, awesome, magical city, yada, yada, yada. But if you're in that city, trying to buy something cool, the day it ports, you're in the Feywild. So,
you're stuck there now.
Like it just happens. And they're at battle with the Fomorians always. So I actually know like it's a weird amount of knowledge. And so I had like Fomorians and Cyclops and Redcaps, and they're all buddying up. And this is really cool. Idea being they were going to wake the Shadow Tarrasque to attack Astralzan the day it's scheduled to port to the prime material.
Oh God, okay.
And then depending on where they were at, because you can cheese a Tarrasque, like hopefully they won't, but you could cheese a Tarrasque. The idea would be that like there's then potentially 2 Tarrasques in the prime material.
Oh wow.
But they've fallen away from it a bit because I dangled a dragon. And so they got into a battle in an ancient black dragon's lair, which was super fun. And even for me, it was like awesome. I was like, I can't believe we're doing it. I was so nervous because it's a dragon in Dungeons and Dragons.
It's in the name, yeah.
And they kind of nerfed dragons quite a bit in 5th edition. Like in 2nd edition, I do have my monsters manual here. Oh, there it is.
I think there's dragons like breathe like negative levels and stuff, aren't there?
Well, they polymorph. They're kind of like Greek gods. Like they can just like walk around like a human because they can. They feel like it. They're like level 20 wizards. They're also dragons.
The metallic dragons can do that, but the chromatic can't in 5e.
Yeah, and so there is the like optional rule of spellcasting. So I was like, yeah, absolutely doing some spellcasting. But yeah, because they nerfed them, I was going to be tricky. So these players that I'm playing with, all of us growing up, like we had this like dragon fear, because dragons were like serious. That's a dragon. It's in the name of the game. So, and I finally managed to get them to like burn some of their higher level stuff, because they were just still holding back. I don't know if you played Final Fantasy, those games growing up, but like we did.
Yes.
So, but like Final Fantasy 3, there's like, elixirs. I think that's what it is. They like, they.
And it's like, I shouldn't use it in case I need it.
You beat the game and you have 99 elixirs on you.
Yeah, a stack of it. Yeah, exactly.
That's what it was like. I was like, you should not have any more action surges left after a battle with an ancient dragon. You shouldn't have any other spell. Like,
but what if something else comes and I need them?
What if? But I finally got them to burn a bunch of them. And they still didn't burn through all of it. And it was touch and go. Like I didn't, I could have, you can always, as a DM, I could have killed them. I don't mean it that way. Like they could have died had I played things slightly different, but I wanted to play things in an entertaining. I didn't like pull punches. I just didn't like, the dragon in its lair could basically show up, shred you, dive back underwater.
Yeah.
Show up, shred you, dive back underwater. So I didn't do that.
This is the thing with like, and we talk about the tiers, and like, you've got tier 1, 2, 3, and 4. And when you get to tier 3 and 4 and you're looking at like, and the end of tier 2 and you're looking at like 7 upwards, you do have a struggle in balancing. And it's not even just balancing, it's just in challenging, because D&D as a game has its, okay, I'll preface this. we talk about game balance all the time, and we can argue for hours about whether D&D and in general 5th edition is a balanced game. I believe it does have more balance than people give it credit for, but it has its own wonky definition of what balance is. And when you get to higher levels, there's this kind of expectation that the game is, in quotes, broken. And in some senses, I think that's justified. In others, I think that isn't. But nonetheless, the fact remains that once you get to those high levels and those players have those abilities, it becomes harder to A, put them in a challenge and make them, do anything that just threatens their hit point value. B, run combat that doesn't last for a long time. And C, kind of know what is and isn't going to be a challenge because your players have so many tricks up their sleeves. And I think that like, especially when you look at the way WotC has published 5th edition content, the game is definitely tiered towards playing in that level 1 to 13 range more than anything else. That seems to be the ideal kind of area that Wizards of the Coast want people to play D&D in. That's kind of the quote unquote true experience. But you would be lying to not just me, but yourself if you say you've never wanted to run something a ridiculous high level and experience it. And there are ways to do it, and there are ways to make it really, really great and fun, and there are ways to make it really stretched out and elongated and not so fun. But and I want to say this before we get into talking about how we would do it, but as with anything, and it's a cop-out answer, and I say that every time I bring this up too, there is a level of this that's going to come down to you and your table and your group and how your games run and what they do and how they like playing. So just put that aside. Like, we know that's a fact. Chuck that out of the window. Take everything you say with a pinch of salt and change it for your own group and stuff too.
Yeah, exactly. There's this is a shout out to another podcast, but it's an awesome one. I don't know if you've heard of his name's Dan Felder, and he made a podcast. He's brought it back on again, but it's called the GM's Guide. Where is he here? And he's a game designer by trade. And he like the first 20 episodes are like everything every DM should listen to. And the one he does on combat and combat encounters, I still use and I still reference because he shows like why and how combat should be dynamic and always feel like it has stakes no matter what. And the big takeaway from it is there should always be something should happen every round. So otherwise it's just like, I hit you. Okay, I hit you. Okay, I hit you. Okay, I hit you. Versus, I think the example he gives is, the players bust in and there's the goblin chief is there and the door is open and all the goblins come out and there's a big fight. Yeah, which could be fun. Or you bust in and the goblin chief is there, but he's got like his 2 elite guards, a couple goblins in the room. But as soon as you come in, he's I'm out of here, and like he rings a bell and dives at a door, and then kind of every round like the elite guards come in, but then now some more goblins came running in from here. Oh, now the chief comes back, but then he ran away again, and now it's still that you're still fighting the same numbers and all those things, but it's much more dynamic and needs a little bit more thought, and that works. That's kind of what I've been doing with the higher level characters, is making it a little bit more dynamic. The social situations and settings are easy enough, at least for me. Plus, the guys I'm DMing with, they'll do some social, but they're like, because they're.
I want to swing my sword.
Yeah, well, we're all like Nintendo playing, 2nd edition playing, Final Fantasy, smashing every pot, like get full questing, those kinds of things, players. So they might not spend an entire session, talking about the ingredients of different potions. Those be like, we'll buy them, let's go. But some of that, making it more dynamic, I think has been really important. But you mentioned it as well. It's challenging for a DM to have players that have all these skills and abilities. You can kind of follow along for that first little while, but then you're just like, I've got to just like trust my players. And sometimes
this is the thing. Like, I think that one of the, and I struggle with this because I'm definitely I'm always have been, and I think I always will be, more of a DM than I am a player. I get more joy out of being a DM, but and being a player is like my vacation, and that's great, and I love that. But being a DM is kind of where I get the most fun. And so I know much more about D&D from a DM perspective than I do from a player perspective. There are classes I still haven't played in 5th edition. There are subclasses I haven't even thought about like touching. I've read them once or twice and I've kind of got an understanding of them and I've talked about them enough to like, you know, run for them and stuff like that. But there are bits of them that I just forget because I don't play as much as I run. So when you get into this kind of higher tier area of the game, and more so the further you go, the more you have to know about your players' character sheets and what they can do. Because, and I think this is probably the first tip I'd give, is or I'll give today, maybe not the first one I'd give, but you need to you need to build into your combats both areas where those players can use those skills and feel amazing, and areas where those skills get nullified. And that's tricky. And especially if you've got a party with like 2 wizards in, like, oh my God, you know, the permutations of the spells that they could have prepared is ridiculous. And as with anything, you're never going to be prepared for absolutely everything. And they'll probably do something you didn't expect anyway. But if you've got a fighter with 2 action surges and a second wind, and you've got a monk who can stun, 6 times random numbers and picking out thin air, you then kind of know, well, I need X amount of hit points to deal with this kind of action economy, and I could do with some legendary resistances. That's going to help to level the playing field a bit. And it's stuff like that, and it's much more complicated than that, but it's stuff like that that really helps when you're first entering into those 7, 8, and more levels of fighting.
Yeah, it's even on the show on Something Wicked, we went through this like combat drought. It's just the way it went. But we were in combat around like level 5 or so, and then we went all the way back to the main city. A bunch of stuff happened, and now we've gone to this like lord's kind of having a big party for all the well-to-do people, and it's a 7-day party. And we keep joking that like I think we've done like 6 or 7 episodes of the show, and we're on like day 3 of the party because there's been so much social stuff, but we've been combat thirsty. And so we just got into this kind of like battle royale thing. And it was like a feel for our DM, because we were level 5 when we were in combat, and now it's a couple months later of real time, we're all level 7, and level 7 is like 5 to 7 is a big jump. 1 to 2. What I like in 5th edition is every level's a big jump. But at 7th level, I'm as a bard, I have polymorph, for example, or I have a 4th level spell. I chose polymorph, and also I have all my little bits and bobs like our class features you get at level 6. So the College of Eloquence bard is what I'm playing. They have unfailing inspiration, and that basically is if I give you inspiration and you use it and it fails, you keep the inspiration. That's a huge mechanic. I mean, I'm even like, oh yeah, I have that. I should remember that. But that's a big deal, especially for, trying to figure out battles and how things work and. Yeah.
And we're talking about combat as well today, but those higher levels affect other stuff. Like, I mean, wizards get teleportation eventually. Like that's, a whole pillar of D&D in terms of travel and exploration kind of can go out the window at that point if the players decide to. So it's in other areas as well as just combat. I want to circle back to talking about the developments and the dynamic stuff in combat, because I feel like that's something that we talk about a lot here, and people who've listened to the older episodes of We Speak Common back in the day, we talk about having environmental factors in combat encounters and having waves in combat encounters, or MacGuffins that they need to do to make the fight a little bit easier, a little bit harder, or whatever, things that make the combats different. And that is 100% like the biggest tool you can use at later levels. Like, I mean, waves, I think they're things that should be thought about in every level of D&D because they make combat so much more interesting. But waves, 100%. If you're not using them by 4th level, start using them. Things like, I want them to fight a giant spider, but they're 7th level. The giant spider is going to get wiped. How do I make it more interesting? Well, give the giant spider loads of armor on its front. Like, it's got a really hard exoskeleton or something. And so it's got like immunity or resistance to damages from the front, but from behind it's got a squishy abdomen and you can really hurt it. But figuring out a way to get behind the spider is going to be really tricky. Maybe it's got an egg sac, and if you move it, it'll run after you, and then your other members can get behind it. Or maybe you can trap it in a hallway or something, like things like that, to just add a bit of thinking and a bit of dynamicness, for lack of a better word, to the encounter, are going to really help with those high levels.
Yeah, and it's neat too. Like, again, a lot of these monsters that I use, they're, if you read a lot of like the Forgotten Realms books or Dragonlance or whatever growing up, like when they're in there and the heroes of the books are struggling, that immediately, if you bump into those in a game, at least for like us, it was like, oh my god, that's a phase spider.
Yeah.
And like drow, wow. So even though like it totally depends, like, you know, even like a phase spider is a cool thing because they can phase in and out of the ethereal plane as a bonus action. So they're a really good dynamic. If you want them want to battle something, but they're going to be too strong, well, then you do a couple of these things. One of the creatures that I'm going to finish homebrewing, but you can tell everyone about it here, is the swarm of goblins.
Yes, I like it.
Because everyone likes fighting goblins, but eventually you're like, all right, like, come on, I'm fighting goblins. But a swarm of goblins, you know, maybe it takes up a 10-foot space and it contains 6 goblins. Like, I haven't padded it all out, but you could give the swarm a certain amount of hit points, and if it loses this, one of the goblins dies. But for every goblin in there, it can do X or Y. You know, it can engulf people. It can, you know, imagine a pack of goblins jumping on the barbarian and they're holding his legs and trying to stab him and stuff.
Cool. Yeah, I like that.
Instead of trying to have, you know, 8 goblins on the field attacking. So it's one creature, but it's got this dynamic element to it, and it's something they can immediately picture. They can go like, a swarm of goblins. So
something that I think you'll like then is, it's in Tomb of Annihilation, you have the Batiri goblins, and they have this battle tactic, I guess it is, where they stack on each other's shoulders and they form a pillar. So
nice.
You get these 3-foot tall goblins, and I think a stack can go up to 9 goblins tall. And in lore, it's so that they can like fight off dinosaurs and things. And in the book is written, it's like, oh, the bottom goblin does all of the strength, dex based checks, and the one at the top does the intelligence and the charisma and stuff. But then you've got all these goblins in the stacks, and they can all like, they're a stack, and so they're stronger because they're together. But there's no real mechanic. Right. So I created a battle stack stat block using the same kind of principles behind Swarm stat blocks, where the battle stack, it can be up to 9 goblins. If there's 9 goblins, they get 3 attack actions. If there's 6, they get 2. If there's 3, they get 1. They have the pull together hit point like a swarm does, and if you do a certain amount of damage, it kills one of the goblins and the stack gets shorter. And then they have these different things that they can do when they're stacked up based on how many they've got, and that was a lot of fun to run. And like the benefit for them stacking was that they became one creature rather than a group, so like AoEing them became less effective, and that's the mechanical benefit for the goblins to do it. So that was a lot of fun to run, and I'd love to give a swarm of goblins a go. That's thematically, like imagining them just climbing like a Goliath, like it's fantastic. Yeah, or
like, you know, like the swarm of kobolds or something, like like you could even, it would be like the clockwork kobold, like it's this like weird kind of essentially a golem, but it's filled with kobolds that are kind of piloting it. And so if you break an arm off, 2 kobolds come flying out, and then they start attacking. So you're breaking this, essentially this giant creaturey thing, but it's full of other little annoying, and you know, kobolds, no big deal. But hey, when there's 6 goblins shooting arrows, that's 6 attacks against potentially 1 character. So even if you're big and strong and cool and tough, like that can slowly burn you down and make it a little bit more energetic and moving. The one of the other ones I did when they were slightly higher level, because I'm trying not to only, my friends and I that played growing up, we know most of these creatures. But I was particularly proud of this trap. They were in like a wizard's kind of laboratory, and off to the 2 sides it looked like maybe like water tanks, but they were about at the surface level. But it didn't look like they were full at the time. And what it was, or what they could kind of see, looked kind of liquidy. There were these tanks that had a gelatinous cube in them. But then on the far side, there was ropers. And the trap is that a roper would grab a character and start reeling it in. And as it reeled it in, it would fall down into the tank and land in the gelatinous cube. Um,
Oh,
and so it was this super dynamic, like, whoosh, and then it's like, as you see this like, wiggly jiggly thing, and they're like, wait, and one of the, one or two of the players, like the human players, were like, and they realized what it was, but I didn't
yeah,
describe it
yeah.
until they finally figured it out. But because it's a roper, I slash off the arm, and then it grows
And
back
then
and
you
shoots another
fall
finger, shoots
straight
back and
in.
shoots back
Yeah.
and shoots, and so became this fun, like super dynamic element of not super difficult creatures. But man, you don't want to get dropped into a pit of a gelatinous cube, even if you're high level. It sucks.
No,
So,
not at all. And I think that's a really good segue into like the next point as well, is like you've got the dynamicness there and you've done a really good job of like not just revealing it all straight away. The best dynamic encounters are the ones that the players have realizations for as they go. So like they might walk in and be like, oh, it's this. And then they realize, oh, it's not that, it's this. And then they realize, oh, it's not just that, it's also this. And it gets like more and more just more and more reveals as you go. And it might not be super, super deadly, but the fact that there's all these different moving elements is going to make it a fun encounter and more challenging. But talking about and swinging back a little bit to what you said about like, oh, 6 goblins attacking is still, a lot. It's going to knock off HP. When you get to those higher levels, you need to start attacking things other than a character's HP. And obviously we have spells and we have abilities and things that kind of do that for us in some sense, stone, what is it? Flesh to stone, things like that, spells that don't kill you, but they are very dangerous and they will effectively retire your character. But the other thing as well is narratively, don't just start attacking hit point pools. Have the characters got an NPC with them that they love? Let's attack him. Have they got a place that they're trying to defend? Is the evil guy threatening the world? Insert evil laugh. There's all of these different narrative things that you can do. I mean, they're all cliche, but there are all these different things you can do rather than just threaten hit points. And I think that that's, again, going to depend on the group and how invested they are, but that's an important element to put in. There needs to be this new threat, not just, oh, I've taken 100 damage. Well, I'll be fine. I can take 3 more of those hits. Because top levels, God, some barbarians can, So that's the next kind of point, is threaten things other than HP.
And similar in social situations.
Yeah.
Even depending on, let's assume you might have this combat encounter that does all these, effectively you want to, like, there needs to be stakes. You're trying to drain them to make them vulnerable or feel vulnerable, however you want to play it. And so if you get them, some characters drain a little bit less, like a barbarian by design, eventually they run out of rages and a couple other things. But it's the social characters, they might not have as much to burn in a battle, but maybe you do pull out a couple of those inspirations and a couple of these other things, and then they're okay, we're feeling good, we're gonna rest, and so they try and find a spot for a short rest. But you make that a little bit more dynamic as well, and that a couple of guards, whatever, stumble upon them and just break the short rest. So they got to keep, now they're in the stage where they're trying to like get away from where they are enough or seal themselves up enough so that they can recover. And there's this threat's always there. Or right after whatever, they storm in and kill the goblin chief. It doesn't matter. After that happens, someone or something else comes to interact with them. As the next step. And so they're just kind of reeling from this bit of combat, and now they've got to switch gears into problem solving or social, doing some kind of social role play to talk their way in or out of something. There can be any kind of number of things. I hate saying there's lots of things you can do and not providing enough examples.
but there are lots of things you can do, and there's so many examples we could give. And the other thing as well is, I think, is, and we kind of, you alluded to it earlier when you said like, oh, I could have killed them. Not that I'm a player that kills, a DM that kills people, but I think at
that level,
and to be fair, I think that any DM should be this kind of DM anyway. If for me, and my players know this, and it works for our group. Some people are going to hate when I say this, but it works for us. We love it. If a character, if a creature would attack a downed character, they will. Like, yes. I'm not gonna pull, quote unquote, pull that punch because I don't, because that character needs to live. If the player, like for me, mimics should be scary creatures, right? Mimics are kind of memey at this point. But if you go in there and you fight a mimic, let's say you're the PC that runs up and opens the chest and it turns out to be a mimic, that mimic is going to grab you, try and make you as unconscious as possible, and then take your body and leave and hide and eat you. That's their instinct. They're a hunting predator. So if you go down in front of the mimic, it's not going to ignore you. It's going to grab you and it's going to pull your corpse away to enjoy as a snack later. And I think that if you're not doing that at lower levels, you know, whatever, that's your group, that's your prerogative. You know what your table likes. But at higher levels, it's so unlikely for a character to go down, B, them to stay down because everyone has healing, and C, then die, that you should just take the opportunity to give them 2 failed death saves by hitting them, because it will terrify them, and then they're probably going to get up anyway.
Well, yeah, and even going into
that feels a bit nonchalant as well. I don't. They might not get up. That is a risk.
Yeah. But at that level, like you said, especially, you know, right now, I can't remember what the party makeup was, but when they went to fight Velfinian, they had, because this is all Feywild back stuff, there's the Merkmoot trade route. Is this like a goblin run kind of seedy market in the swamps in the Feywild, and I've got the whole PDF about it, but there's a character there who essentially is a slave trader, and all his slaves have these slave collars on them. They're magical collars, but they were like, if we're fighting a dragon, we need better heals, and they ended up hiring an NPC that was a life cleric. And so between the life cleric and the druid in the party, if someone did go down all 3 failed death saves, they could bring them back. And even like my friend that's the bard, he's like, hey, worst case, I can reincarnate you. Yours might be something different. And so like they were actually already, like, they were kind of steeled against, but they were prepared that it might happen, but it might also be super fun.
Yeah, and like at that point as well, death isn't a scary thing for a character. And I think that's why I'm enjoying probably running Tomb of Annihilation, because you've got that whole thing of death is final. If you die, that's it, you're gone. We're playing it on Meat Grinder, so a death save is a 15 to succeed. And even then, even at that point, I think the guys, they're 4th level, and really making them earn their levels as well. You know, they're in the jungles, and even at 4th level, if someone goes down, it's not like people go, oh no, like they'll panic, but there's less panic at 4th level than there was at 2nd level, because there's already a good chance that they're going to get back up, like within less than a round. So even at those lower levels, you've got that, I'm going to say issue. It's not an issue. You've got that issue. So when you get to the high levels, like that's just off the charts. And so you need to be using those opportunities to really put the fear of God into the player, that they might lose their character. If it works for your table, of course.
Yeah. And that can be little things too that are, you know, I'm going to do this counterspell. Wait, what? Like the first counterspell I dropped on them, they're like, what? The look on their faces, they're like, you know, negating something that they do. Even, you know, dropping a silence here and there, and having like little spell-based traps, or little annoying things. Cassidy, my character, I used Magic Mouth for a little while because we made the Orcish mob mad, so they're delivering heads to our place. And so I used Magic Mouth on a statue that if anyone came to deliver like something like a severed head, it would just be like, hey, get out of here. We don't want any more heads on our, hey, look at this guy, he's dropping off heads. Hey, get out of here. And so, but that was the alarm trigger.
Fantastic use of that spell.
Yeah. And so it essentially became like a doorbell. And I didn't do it this time. I think next level I'm going to switch back to getting it, because I'm rich now anyways, but I want to have it for all of these random social situations and all these little triggers on it that could be super fun. Or you could use it, you know, Magic Mouth triggers another, which is effectively an alarm system. But it's an audible one that's repeating. Yeah, you guys need to make this thing be quiet because it's now shouting all the way, like those kinds of things. So now instead of the usual, like, that's the big guy, let's focus him down, then we'll do this, then we'll like another dynamic element. And hey, maybe they go running after the Magic Mouth and they step on a glyph. And X thing happens, or there's different spell triggers, or I would say don't be afraid to use the higher level spells. One thing I am absolutely guilty of is my air quote prep, because my players I give them A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and H as options, and they're like speaking some other language entirely. It's not even a Latin-based language. And so I put a little bit of prep into things. I don't say none, like, okay, I'm ready. And then I can react to them. But one thing on the DM side that's challenging is at these higher levels, your monsters that you're using are also higher level and dynamic and have more things they can do and more things that they would do. And that can be really tricky. One thing that's been awesome for me, I don't know if you've seen the blog. Oh, I got the book over there. The Monsters Know What They're Doing.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I gave a copy away. I loved it that much.
Yeah. Oh, such a good book. And it's so handy.
So good.
You just kind of read through it and go like, okay, yeah, like this, it essentially makes a bunch of monsters like NPCs, which is great.
Yeah.
Like, so you can look at it. Okay, they're going to do this, and now we're going to do that, and it gives some reasoning behind things. And even I did. Oh shoot, what are those? What are those creatures that rock around with Mind Flayer? Intellect Devourers?
Yeah, Intellect Devourers. Yeah. CR. They're like a CR2, and it's not a good. That's not what they are. They're much worse than that. They could drop you very easily.
Yeah, I found this this book. God, it's from it's like the Book of Traps or something like that.
Yeah,
it's from like the 70s or 80s or something, but it's awesome. They're hilarious. Yeah, Grimtooth's Traps is what it's called. And it's all these. Yeah, God, trying to find the year on it if I can because it's hilarious. Yeah, 1981. So,
okay.
But it's all these traps you can absolutely use and modify, and you can use them based on your party. And the one that I was using is called the Door Kicker, and that's because my party is a smash party. So I had this door. The door was locked. I knew they'd probably try and kick it down. The idea behind the door smasher is it's like a paperweight door. So as soon as they put a boot on it, they kick right through it, which ensnares them and then pulls them down a hallway. And so when that happened, Barbarian kicks it and then pulled them down the hallway right into a combat encounter. But now they're 50, 60 feet away from everyone in the party. So it's this combat they kind of weren't really expecting. And
they have to run to get to it.
The party is split up. Yeah. So, and now, the Barbarian's a challenge, but the Barbarian's been pulled down and away and is having a surprise round against it. So it doesn't have all his rage up, his this and that. And I think it was, I'm trying to remember how I did. I did two different ones. I did one door that was really, really hard to break. And then like the other one beside it was the Door Kicker.
Yeah.
Or like little things. It was like, you kick the door and it might swing on its axis. So it like spins
like a revolving door?
Like a, gosh, how am I trying to describe this? Like a paddle, like a paddle, like a side.
It's kind of like Takeshi's Castle of the doors.
Revolving door. So it spins. So like one of those like funny kind of. And I think the one Door Kicker I did, he got pulled into a room that would have been a really hard fight against some undead. But because we use a lot of homebrewy stuff, he's essentially the path of the Wild Surge. But I found a table for it that's got like 20 different rolls instead of the 8 or so. And it's been super fun. Path of Wild Surge is hilarious and lots of fun.
Yeah.
But he rolled one that was like it was like a fear effect. And it just hit. And so like these characters that I was like, and then they're going to get him and it's going to be fun because they're going to walk up the Barbarian and beat him in his own game. And he successfully feared them. So they just had to like sit across the room and like throw darts at him or something. I can't remember. But the other one too, as a little trap was with the Intellect Devourer. It was, you walk through the door, whatever, you take a step and you fall through. And then there's like 3 Intellect Devourers jumping around and they're like, oh my God. Because again, oh no, swat these flies, kill these mosquitoes. Oh yeah, sorry, you have like dengue fever.
I built a disgustingly high level trap for the DM challenge for this year's D&D celebration. I need to stick it up on the Patreon. But that was one of those traps that had a combat involved and it had dynamics, and then there's like a fear rune on the far door that's really hard to dispel. So even if you get within 30 feet of the door to leave, you then have to pass this fear aura to even get close to it. And I'll stick it up on the Patreon
nice.
soon so people can grab it. But Yeah, that was a lot of fun to build. But you're right, and talking about like having high level NPCs and high level creatures as well is like, if we talk about how the players have all of these options at hand at higher levels. You have them too, and anything that they can do, you can do, and you shouldn't be afraid to do that. You shouldn't be afraid to use those game breaking spells because they have the game breaking spells, and you shouldn't be afraid to throw the strong monsters at them because they're strong monsters. And there's that level as well of like action economy, and you can't just throw one monster and having to have I think we don't need to talk about that. Everybody knows that action economy is going to outweigh a single enemy, but don't be afraid to use those big powerful spells because they can do it too.
Yeah, we even I have this really cool homebrew item which I'll flip over to you in here on Twitter or something. But they're called flasks. And they're awesome. It was essentially, they're, instead of being just a potion, so you have your potion that you pull off your hip and drink or whatever. Flasks are filled with a number of potions.
Ooh, okay.
So you carry one, and then but you can buy them. And so like looking at it, it's basically they're dice. So the cheapest one would be a D4, and it's like 1 times the base cost. What happens is you drink your potion, and then you roll a D4. If you roll above a 2, so a 3 or 4, it's still drinkable. If you roll a 1 or 2, it goes down in a size. So a lot of them have bought like D10 potions. So they drink a potion, roll it. If they roll a 1 or a 2, it shrinks, and then it goes down to a D8, D6, D4, which it's because we're crunchy from second edition. Like, yeah, it's great, but like, you can hear me explaining it like it sounds super complicated, but it kind of makes more sense than someone having like 30 potions strapped around them and drinking them all.
Yeah.
But we kind of, the way we play in our game is sometimes we're like, I don't know. And we'll look up the rule and we're like, I don't know. And we'll kind of say like, if this is how we're going to play it, this is how it will be played in the game, and they're okay. And so baddies have started using flasks. And they're like, whoa, what? Like, you can't do that. I say. You're like, no, they absolutely can. Like, why? Flasks are awesome.
Why would they not? Yeah, exactly. Why wouldn't your enemy polymorph you into a newt?
Yeah, and we do things like we've switched it, but I think it's I can't remember anymore. I think we allow you to take a potion on yourself as a bonus action, but on someone else it's an action. And then when I started doing that with the NPCs, they were like, wait, what? I'm like, yeah, oh yeah. He takes a sip, looks like he's feeling better. You gotta describe it better than that. And off you go. And then it can also become fun. I think you just mentioned actually in the combat rules part is not every character, creature, thing in combat or otherwise has to be actively trying to kill the players. They can just be annoying them or making maybe one is sneaking up and trying to steal something. It steals that flask off your hip. You go to drink it and it's not there, and you hear a giggle and you see a kobold running away or whatever, whatever it may or may not be fitting to your scenario. And then it's now become a like, crap, I don't have that, like that automatic, that it'll throw them off balance, but in a good way. And that's really what I try and do. And especially as you're getting into these higher levels is, keep them a little bit off balance so it doesn't become monotonous, which it can do. But it also isn't like, they want to feel like they earn it. And that's really, really what it is. And that's the same with going for the kill. Like I say to them, and it's because growing up a lot of the time, the DM was seen as adversarial. It's like the players against the DM. And you can play that way, but it's not really like that. The DM is impartial, which is to me scarier because they're like, this guy kills you. I'm like, what? You killed me? Like, I didn't do anything. When I was playing like our local game shop, I ended up running the learn to play sessions there, and be a lot of younger kids. And so it was funny. It must have been strange, but for me, it was like I was playing at the table with my friends as a kid again.
Yeah,
and they're all new. But they ended up fighting like a zombie beholder, I think.
Oh, nice.
And once I think that's what it was. So yeah.
I forget the actual name of them, but I can see the art. The skull with the floating eye lights.
Oh, those are no, those are slightly different. Those are
okay.
Those are called. This is actually like a beholder zombie. It's an undead.
What
beholder.
am I thinking of? What is that? That's a. I need to know now.
I was gonna grab my book, but my friend has it.
Mine's right behind me. I've got to know.
It,
It's gonna bug me.
yeah, I know exactly what you're thinking of. But
Mm.
yeah, this one though has the eye rays. It's got 4 of them, and the one kid ran up and tried to fight it, and then it was like, all right, I'm gonna roll an eye ray, boink, and I rolled disintegration ray, and he
Mhm.
failed it. He failed to save, and he got absolutely um,
Annihilated.
annihilated. He turned to dust
Yeah.
and fell and collapsed and fell apart. And that was like, those evenings we only had, I think it was like 3 hours, and it ended up being, about 2.5 or so of playtime. And that was kind of at the end of the night. Like they didn't actually finish the combat.
Mm.
And the look on his face, like he looked so, I felt so bad because he just
Yeah.
looked
Yeah.
devastated. I was like, that's the way it
This
goes.
is the fear of me ever
Yeah.
killing off my other half's character. The rest of them, they go home after the session. I live with her. I got
exactly.
I got to deal with that. I was
Yeah.
thinking of a Death Tyrant, which is
Yes.
it is an undead. It is an undead beholder, but it's a very different type of undead beholder.
Yeah.
Um,
The look on his face though, I was sad about it, and then life went on. But I talked to his dad, and he was like, that was like the best D&D session he ever had. His dad was playing at the table with him, and he's like, he told me the whole story on the way home, which I was I was there watching. He's like, and as soon as we got home and his mom asked how was it, he told the whole story again, like it was this. And that was maybe, I felt good about that as a DM because I was like, man, I disintegrated a 12-year-old's character. It was a one shot.
That's such a weird sense. I disintegrated a 12-year-old.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I did it in a way that they thought it was like super fun and cool. Because I didn't go like, oh, yeah, disintegrate, you turn to dust. What? It was, I built it up a little bit, like, okay, here we go. And it was a learn to play. Like the learn to plays tended to be one shots anyways. So, and I, even with the kids, I would pick like I almost never did level 1 just because it's not a lot of fun.
Great,
a lot of them, I usually do like 2 to 5 or so, which is a pretty good, again, there you go. I 2 to 5. And they'd said like, why can't we play high level? I'm like, you don't know how to, and it would be hard for you and for me to come next week and me hand you level 10 character sheets. You'd spend an hour looking over these character sheets and not knowing what half the stuff was, and then I would be prepared for level 10 characters. But really, and this is the same thing again, coming back to it, even experienced players, even though they're handed a level 10 character, they still think they're maybe a level 5 character. And so I can do this, and I got my extra attack. You're like, you got that extra attack 5 levels ago. 5. And even like the time it takes to level. So, level 1 to 5 is pretty speedy. Even if you're slow about it, it's still pretty speedy. But then eventually, like level 10 to 11 is going to take you as long as those first 4 levels, or 11 to 12, and so for me, I've looked at like getting a level up isn't the only mechanic in the game that can make the characters more powerful. And so that's the time. I'm also 2nd edition, all about like my magic and magic items and whatnot. So they're
and
super high fantasy.
I love the the boons in the DMG and stuff like that, and charms and special things that you can get that are one-time uses or permanent additions to the character that aren't necessarily a level up, but they are a power boost. Like stuff like that really intrigues me. And to be fair, that's probably another episode that should be spoken about. But yeah, I've just looked at the clock and realized how long we've been talking. But
sorry, like I said, I'll keep talking and talking.
Oh no, it's been a lot of fun.
I'll really quickly just finish the one idea on character level, like versus item level. Knowing who my players are and what they're playing, Druid is always going to be looking for Staff of the Woodlands. Paladin's going to be looking for the Holy Avenger. So what I've actually done is they already have a nerfed version of those that are slowly leveling as they are, but I'm treating it more of a like not an experience base, but a milestone. So when they do something awesome, that weapon gets better and it becomes more of the Holy Avenger. And they're like, wow, like, because to me, being an anime nerd, it's this fun thing of like, dig deep and plus ultra and now my sword does something different. So, and maybe it's something that unlocks in that combat, that they're really down in the dumps, or it's really, really hard, but then something happens to this item. And then it happens going forward.
It's something that I think my group's been doing for years, but I think it's become a lot more popular with things like Critical Role and the Vestiges and all that kind of stuff. But scalable weapons, but also customizable weapons. Like I've got a third-party rule system I bought off DMG, not DMG, well, it is DMG, but Devs Guild, that gives like crafting to weapons and making just mundane weapons be able to level up and change and stuff as well. And I think that if you can have those elements in your game, you should absolutely put them in, because they add just another like just tier of thought and story that goes into the items that your characters hold as well. Yeah. I know 100% that there are people listening to this episode who have thought, how are we not halfway through yet? Because I completely forgot to try and sell you the beautiful products of our partners today. You distracted me so much by the conversation that I forgot to tell you to go and buy dice from the Dice Dungeon and to subscribe to Describe. So I'm going to do a very quick little pitch to you, Patrick.
Sure.
As someone who's been playing D&D for a very, very long time, I imagine that the one thing you need in your life, above all else, is more D&D dice. Am I right?
Oh, of course. I'm a dice goblin. Yeah. The Clay and the Clacks. I'm a member of like multiple dice groups on Facebook. So yeah.
How many of those dice groups are like AA dice groups? Like, hi, my name's Patrick and I collect D&D dice and I need help.
Oh, zero. The one is like the Dice Goblins community, and there's a Dice Goblins market. So.
Oh, fantastic. Well, look, if you want to grab yourself some really nice premium D&D dice, there is a wonderful store based here in the UK, ships worldwide, who have been sponsoring this show for over a year now, which is crazy.
Yeah.
The Dice Dungeon have beautiful, and I really mean it, beautiful D&D dice, resin, metal, glass, but also all the extra stuff that you need for D&D, like dice trays to roll them in, like books to run the games. I've actually pre-hurt my wallet by asking Ben to put aside 3 copies of the new books for me, like one of each. So it's not a good relationship for me. It hurts my wallet, really. But if you want to help support my addiction, head over to the Dice Dungeon. Use the code WeSpeakCommon for 10% off everything in your basket when you buy through them. And then, of course, if you're struggling with creative writing, or if you're not great at the describing of, see what they did there, the scenes, the spells, the monsters, Describe have professional and acclaimed creative writers creating that box text for you. Describe is DSCRYB, add.com on the end. Hit enter, you'll find the website. Over 3,500 scenes available now. It grows every week. They have loads of them available for free, so go and have a look, see what they're doing. And if you like it, you can subscribe and you get 10% off your membership every month for 2 years if you use the code COMMON on checkout.
They're both awesome, by the way. I don't work for any of these people, but I've like been on Describe and looking around at it. Super great. Even if you are someone, you're like, I'm good, I do lots of the writing. Sure.
But everyone has writer's block.
Matchsticks. Yeah, there's that, and these are matchsticks of creativity. You read it and go like, yeah, and you get these 1 or 2 little bits, and that's all you needed. Like you said, it's a writer's block thing. Oh, I'm great, I can write all these things, but sometimes that little frame for you, and you can go from there.
The one thing I like to do as well is if I'm struggling to, like, if I've got that itch to write some D&D stuff, but I don't have an idea, is I'll go and find a scene on there that I like, and then I'll write something around the scene. That's always good fun too, and that gets that creative gear going in the back of my head if I need it to spin a little faster. Cool. We've had a really good conversation today. I've really enjoyed this, and I think just to sum it up, because we've talked more about like how to, like, the things you need to think about in high tier play, and I say high tier, but mid to high tier. Really quick, and I'm going to challenge you to give me bullet point answers. Sure. What are your 3 things to think about?
As a DM or as a player, or both?
Both.
Okay.
Like the 3 things.
3 things. As a DM, know your characters, your characters' sheets. If you can know your players, that's great. So you know those abilities, those high level abilities. 2, use stronger monsters, or make or find variants of those weaker monsters that you're more comfortable with, but know their abilities as well, particularly the casters. Because that can get complicated. So you need a little bit more prep than you might have thought. And 3, combat or not, it needs to be dynamic, and there needs to be stakes. That's kind of like a 2-parter. Sorry, but stakes.
No, I'll take it.
Yeah, we'll say stakes. Keep them not necessarily guessing. Keep them engaged. You don't want to break it and have them go like, oh, I don't even know what to expect. You want them to be engaged and trying to figure it out, and then it doesn't really matter what level they are. a level 17 character, like the person using that character will have just as much fun if it's dynamic as a level 1. As the player, use your stuff. Oh man, you got so many cool things. Drop them. Boom. Go nuts. Flex. Cast spells. Or upcast. It's like that's a crazy thing for me.
No one upcasts. No one does that.
I do all the time.
Yeah.
Even with if I bring up Cassidy, Cassidy Thorn. Where is she? From the Feywild, coming at you with some spells. So whenever I roll, what'd you roll? I'm like, I rolled a 23. What did I upcast? I think I upcast Dissonant Whispers at just at 2nd level, 4d6 damage. What? Like that's not nothing. And then they run away from you. So use your high level stuff. However you use it. Don't be afraid to upcast a lowly, like even a magic missile upcast. You're just gonna like slam a guy or girl or tree or whatever you're fighting. So same thing. And then again, so yeah, use your high level skills. Also be dynamic with them. It doesn't always have to be punching and kicking and whatnot. You get to a point where you're powerful enough. Be creative with your own interactions in combat. Hold a guy, shove a guy, throw them, silence them, anything in between. And then I guess the third one is your tanks should be pretty tanky. So don't be afraid if they take a little bit of a zap from you if you're firing in from the back. And tanks, stay tanky. Get your mages. Yeah, your casters should be able to get away. So ideally, they can take one hit or two. Let them take it. But this is where it gets dynamic, because then what are you going to do? Are you going to run over and help the caster, or then you have to run back and forth, or?
Yes, I was going to go in and add my own 3, but you know what? I think you've done that beautifully. So the only thing I will add for the DMs is add the stakes that aren't just HP. So go for adding that challenge, adding that thing, target that thing that isn't just the HP value. That's my final say there. Patrick, it has been absolutely wonderful. I'm sure we'll get you on again. Before we go, before we say see you later, one last quick plug. Where can people find you on the internet for Cassidython?
Cassidython! She can be found on twitch.tv/something5e. Wednesday nights at 6 p.m. Pacific time. And we do post them onto the internet somewhere else. And then it is also a podcast somewhere that I should know how to link properly before I tell people about it. I think it's like available wherever you get your podcasts.
Yeah, that's usually the way, isn't
it? There's on Twitter, it's at something5e. And then I am at PWC Higgins on Twitter. So I'm there sometimes. You'll see me once or twice a week clicking a thing and saying, come on, show. Yeah, we're getting there.
And as I always do, I will make the half joke that one day I will guest on your actual play D&D podcast. Thank you very much. That's the payment.
Yeah, okay. For sure.
I tell everyone that I'm going to do it, and it never happens. So you'll be the first. Thank you for listening to We Speak Common. If you want to get involved, if you want to get in touch, the D&D Agni Aunt corner is open. Submissions are still coming in. If you have a problem in your D&D game and you want to hear how myself and anyone else would tackle it, send them in to wespeakcommon@hotmail.com. I'm collecting a load of them before I start talking about them. So by all means, send those in. Maybe you've got a weird specific problem, or you just want to know what I would do, or James would do, or Patrick would do. Send them in. If you want to get in touch with the show, you can do it that way. You can also get us on Twitter, on Instagram, and anywhere on the internet that has an @ handle, at We Speak Common, or on Reddit. If you see someone talking about We Speak Common, it's probably me. Let's be honest. I talk about my own stuff all the time. Yeah, gotta plug it. So so trust me, say hello. If you want to get involved and join the Discord server, then by all means, head over to the Patreon, get involved, and come and join us. We're talking there all the time. I say this every week. I know it sounds like I have to say it, but I honestly mean it. It is my most favorite thing to be a part of that little server. It's my favorite corner of the internet, so I'd love to have you. But if you don't want to pay for this free content on the internet, who would? Do the next best thing and just send it to someone that likes D&D and podcasts. Cool. And final plug before I forget. Today is your last chance to enter the Obsidian Portal giveaway on Twitter. If you're listening to this on Thursday, on Twitter at We Speak Common, you need to enter before the end of today. So go and enter that. Cool.
Coolsies.
Lovely.
Hooray.
Thank you very much. I will speak to you soon, Patrick.
Yeah, no worries. I'll let you stop the recording.
Thanks for listening today. I hope you enjoyed the show. If you did, do us a favour and share us with a friend or a D&D group near you. If you'd like to directly support We Speak Common, you can by heading to the links in the description, either on this episode or via our social medias to find our Patreon. It's the best way to directly support the production of more shows like the one you listened to today. You can connect with the show on Twitter and Instagram at We Speak Common. The music in the episode is Street Dancing by Timecrawler 82 and is held under a Creative Commons 4.0 license. You can find it on the Free Music Archive.